Well, hello there. Happy 4th of July. I'm Sable Aradia, and I'm here with my compatriot,
Lilith Dorsey, hi. If you can hear me through the shelling and the fireworks and all of that.
Sounds like you guys are having a great time out there. Right on.
Yeah, it's a thunderstorm too, so it could get interesting over here.
Well, I guess we'll just have to see what happens, eh?
Yeah. Ooh. Mike, did I lose you? You're frozen.
No, I'm hearing like a back echo, and I was keeping quiet to make sure I wasn't confusing the situation. Okay, well.
All right, cool.
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in, I guess. So we'll see what happens here. I don't know if there's like a mic issue or if we're getting a feedback loop, but anyway, or if maybe I've got two windows open. I'm gonna check that. Sorry. Okay, yes. All right, it was my fault. Okay, I left the original window open. For some reason, when you open up one of these chats, right, it'll have the original window, and then it'll open up a second window. And I guess it was playing back. Okay, so anyway, today we're going to talk about a controversial subject in the pagan community, and that is the money. So there is a belief in a lot of branches of paganism, which comes from mostly Gerald Gardner's brand of Wicca, that one should not charge for the craft. Now, I have some views on that, and I'm sure that you also have some views on that, Lilith, and I'd love to hear what you have to say first, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, no problem. And it's funny, I love the way you brought up Gardner, because I always bring him up when I'm talking about this discussion. And I think a lot of people, their notions about those kinds of things do come from practices that he had started. But I come from an Afro-Caribbean tradition, and if we're talking about Haitian Voodoo or, you know, Lakumi, better known as Santeria, some of them can get really expensive. Now, the earlier initiations, I mentioned before, like the necklaces in Santeria, the aliques, that's usually somewhere between $250 and $500. But if you're talking about full initiations and things like that, depending on which Orisha you're going to have seated, you know, you could be talking between $10,000 or $15,000. Now, everybody's always like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. But, you know, I was just thinking, I always compare magic to medicine. Now, if I'm going to a doctor, the doctor charges me $20 to take out my appendix. He's probably not a really good doctor.
Right.
And, you know, it seems to me if we're willing to pay for medical care, if we're willing to pay for other things, lawyers, they cost a fortune. And a lot of times they don't. That we should all practitioners, when we're talking about some of these ceremonies, it's talking about you've got to get, you know, so many priests and so many priestesses and so much food and so many animals and, you know, drummers and dancers and singers and all. And so you're really paying for a big, huge production in order to make yourself, you know, further on your spiritual path. So it's not something that's done lightly, and everybody has to do it. It's not like, oh, person over here gets it for free and person over here gets it for $20,000. You know, I think originally what would happen was you would go and you would tie the year of your time to the house and you would work for them every day. I know my priestess Miriam did that with her house in Chicago. She was there cleaning every day and washing up and tithing a certain portion of her income. So, you know, to me, that's worth a lot more than $20,000 to some people, you know. So I think we really need to contextualize it when we're talking about these things. And this isn't something new for us. We've been doing this way for a very long time.
See, now I think that's really interesting, right? And it's cool that you brought up healthcare, right? Because this allows us to look at another side of the issue, right? Being Canadian, it's okay. I won't say healthcare isn't precisely free. right? You are expected to pay a certain yearly fee that contributes to the medical system based on your income. If you live below poverty level, you pay nothing, right? And our medical system, I think this is great. My husband was in a major car accident. He was a taxi driver. You know, if I had experienced this in Washington State, I would still be digging myself out of the bankruptcy, and probably a lot of the life-saving procedures that he had, he would not have received because we would not have been able to afford to pay for them. We probably wouldn't have had insurance, you know. So some might say, okay, well, this is religion we're talking about. Shouldn't religion be available to everyone? Okay, dear, I don't know. You don't. You're not. I don't know, responding. I don't know whether it's frozen or whether you're thinking about it. Or
oh no, I was thinking about it. I was thinking, no, it should be available to everyone. I agree with that, but I think, you know, for us it is available to everybody. But if you want the extra things, you know what I mean, even within Christianity, Catholicism, if you want to go and, you know, get baptized or confirmed, there's certain fees, certain things have to be paid for. It's not a fortune. Some of it's implied, you know, that there's supposed to be an envelope here and an envelope there, but there's definitely a system in place. And then people also, again, tithe a certain portion of their funds in order to go to the church. And that, I mean, I feel like within this community, there are a lot of people that are hurting. You know, I had a friend that used to make a joke, how do you know the pagan priestess? Well, she lives in the middle of nowhere in a shack that you can't find, you know, like, usually
pretty much
the nicest shack. So I think that there is an issue of compensation that needs to happen.
See, now, I admit I was playing a bit of a devil's advocate there, right? Because I have a controversial opinion among a lot of Wiccans, and that is that shit costs money. You know, shit costs money. I wrote this article a couple years ago now. It got a lot of attention and a lot of notoriety and a lot of hate mail, and it was called Free Events Discriminate, or Why Free Events Discriminate Against the Pagan Poor. And it sounds like a contradiction, but see, the problem is that in our existing system, where people generally believe that you shouldn't have to pay for religion, what we have ended up with is a system in which people donate all of their time, if they have time to spare, and get burnt out, right? The people who are doing pagan priestessing or priesting full-time generally are either receiving some other form of fixed income, like disability, right? Or they are, you know, like their spouse has a job that is white collar and is paying the mortgage already, right? So they can afford in that way to spend that time, right? You don't find a lot of blue collar people practicing, you know, doing anything more than showing up at the Sabbats. And that's because they can't afford to, right? Because they have to work for a living, right? In my case, I tried every possible avenue I could think of to be a professional witch and could not do it, right? I write books, right? I write music. I produce all of this stuff. I make things. I have an Etsy store. I used to have a metaphysical shop. And I do workshops, I read tarot, and in all of these situations, right, with all of these income streams coming in, I still have to work part-time at a bookstore in order to make ends meet. So if we're not going to pay for it individually, how are we going to cover the expense and the time? There was another, I read Wicca Covens by the wonderful late great Judy Harrow, right? And she was a Wiccan priestess and also a psychologist, right? And she was making the point that there's people now who have their third degree initiation in Wicca, right, generally put in about 7 to 10 years worth of study and practice in order to do that. Now, that's about the equivalent of a doctorate, right? So you know, when you graduate from an accredited university, of which you can, you know, you can graduate from the theological university if you want to study Judeo-Christian theology as a general rule, right? And you can become a professional priest or priestess, well, you know, in a minister in a variety of faiths. If I were, you know, if I believed in Anglicanism, right, I could make a living doing that, right? There's a place, Anglicans accept female ministers. There's no reason why I couldn't do that. And the parish would pay for my expenses. I would, you know, I wouldn't be making a great living, but I'd be living in a nice little house, you know, and my, you know, my needs would be cared for so that I could go and spend my time doing what I want to do, which is serve the gods and the people who serve the gods in the best way that I know how. But I can't because of the way our structure works. Now, the Christian structure does it by donation, often public shaming. Sometimes they go out of their way to be aggressive about it, you know, evangelism on TV and all that sort of thing. And I don't think that's the way we should go. But I do think that we have reached a place now where we need to consider how we're going to handle things if we want to continue to have these things and have it ever grow beyond a meeting in somebody's living room with the potluck dinner.
No, I agree. And I think we really need to open up our minds. About maybe 10 years ago, I suggested, you know, I was going to do after rituals, I was going to pass an offering plate. And you should, I probably would have gotten less flack if I'd said everybody was going to take off their tops and rub their nipples. You know, people, just the thought of having an offering plate was such an affront to them and who they were. And it was too Christian and we don't need to do this. And I thought, well, but who's going to pay for all this food that's here, and who's going to pay for these candles, and who's going to pay for the rest of it, you know? And you brought up a really good point. Like in some houses, the priest and the priestess and all of those people all the way down, they have to have a regular job so that they're, you know, even if they had enough money through spiritual means, they have to have a regular job because it's seen as preventing them from getting greedy. I don't want to say, oh, someone calls me for a reading. I don't want to say, oh, yeah, you need a reading because I got to people that are like a mailman or a postal carrier or something that also happen to be a priest or a priestess in the tradition. So, you know, for us, we do it, but we do other things as well. And I think that we need to just rethink these things really for us. It's not out of greed, it's out of, you know, necessity. And this is how our system works. We're not freegans, and I was a hippie, but we're not freegans.
Yeah, I'm an anti-corporatist. Right? I write for gods and radicals. I don't, I'm not in support of the way the capitalist system is currently abused. I think that, you know, like, so, okay, so I agree with you. I'm not about the money, right? I'm not interested in getting rich. You know, if I wanted to do that, I could go join the New Age movement and I could, you know, sell the most amazing crap, right? And people, I'm sorry, I mean, like, not lots of good stuff happens in the New Age movement, but there are a lot of people out there who take advantage of nice people, right?
Sure.
And I could do that, right? But I don't want to do that because this is not what I'm here for, right? I'm here because I want to make a difference and because I believe in what I'm talking about, and I want to, you know, help other people who believe in similar things to find what they need when they need it. So, you know, it frustrates me that we have this issue. And okay, so then the question becomes, all right, you know, if you swear to the Ardanes, right, the laws of the craft, right, and I would like to point out, we talked about Gardner before, right? Gardner was part of a wealthy upper class, right? He could afford to not charge for things because he had an income and he, you know, didn't need this extra stuff, right? But I come from a blue collar background, you know, so I can't afford to always buy the candles, you know, I can't afford to always provide the ritual wine. like you say, this stuff requires that somebody else do it. Now you can rely on people coming together and bringing it, and in small groups, I find that generally works really well. Especially, you know, you develop a bond and people get used to contributing their share and they feel like they're all coming together. But in large groups, it doesn't work at all, right? Especially if now we have the issue of space and insurance, right? You want to rent a hall, it costs money. Everybody wants you to have insurance if they want to rent a hall to you. Insurance is expensive. It's bloody expensive. Who's going to pay for that? You know? Or do we always have to go over to Susan's living room, right? Or Susan, or, you know, Veronica's backyard, right? Who therefore constantly, you know, could exert covert power over when we have the ritual and who's allowed to come and under what circumstances we can do all of these things, right? Now I've experimented with some solutions, right? One thing that we've been trying here is that we have a general Sabbath fund, right? And anybody in the community can draw upon this fund if they want to host the Sabbath, right? Now, a group in Vancouver's been doing this for a lot of years, and they've never formally opened a bank account. They've never created a nonprofit society. They never did any of this stuff. And then people say, oh, well, you know, I mean, what happens if somebody steals the money? That happens. It's happened, I think, 3 times in the 30 years that they've been doing it, that somebody has just disappeared, made off with the entire fund, and they've had to start again from square one. But in the meantime, they're not paying filing fees. They're not paying incorporation fees. They're not having bureaucratic power struggles over who gets to sign the name chairperson to things, right? And, you know, they're not dealing with banks. They're not dealing with bank fees. They don't, you know, they don't have to deal with all this shit. So for them, it's worth it. I think for us, it could also be worth it. And I seem to have lost Lilith there. Hopefully she'll be back in a minute. Right? But so this is one way in which we're dealing with that. There we go. I see her coming back up. There you go. You're back.
Fantastic.
Cool. You didn't miss much.
Okay.
Me rambling on. Right? So yeah, so I think there are ways that we can handle it. Now, a lot of us come from very damaging backgrounds where we feel that religion depended upon what you could pay, and there was shame if you didn't contribute your $20 to the offering plate or whatever church we came from. And yeah, that's true, right? And I don't ever want anybody who comes to one of the Sabbaths I put on to feel ashamed for not being able to contribute to the Sabbath fund. We generally ask now for a suggested donation, right? If you don't have it, come anyway, right? It's not there to make you feel bad. It's there because we have to pay for the candles.
Sure.
You know, that's it. So, but I don't know, you know, and I don't want to, we don't have the numbers to do the kind of stuff that Christianity does, nor the established reputation, right? Somebody goes out into the world, they want to incorporate as a Christian nonprofit society. Everyone's like, oh, okay, no problem. You know, we have to fight harder for that. So, you know, like, people will contribute to that just because they feel like good Christians by doing so. We don't have a pagan ethic that requires that people contribute financially to things. And maybe we should develop one, because your priestess cannot do it forever, you know?
No, of course. I agree completely. You know, and yeah, I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't say 100%, but I have talked to several people who knew Gardner, and they said, you know, he wasn't all necessarily about that either. He just talked that up because he thought it was a good idea going forward from that point, you know. So I'm just throwing that out there because that has been an alternative, you know, history line that people have presented to me. So I think that, again, we need to be practical. We need to realize what's happening and what's going on, and we really need to assess the situation. You know, I would never turn anybody away, but like, you're not necessarily going to get a 6-hour ceremony where you get crowned and everything else like that for free, because again, it cost everybody else money all the way along. You know, I was thinking about a friend of mine And part of what he put in his song were diamonds and emeralds and, you know, things like that. Those aren't cheap, you know, like,
right.
And we also have a thing that you're not supposed to barter for it either. So I
we
think
have that too.
Oh, see, there you go. So I think it is good, though, in Lukumi that there are set prices for things usually. I know it's expensive and everything, you know, and I'm constantly, just the other day, I got somebody complaining about, well, I can't get anybody to do this for under $200. And it was nice to be able to say to him, well, that's kind of what it costs, $200. So there is a standardization in the, you know, I know if I'm in Miami or New York, something will cost approximately this much. And even when I put it in my first book, Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean Paganism, this should cost you this. And that was, you know, 2004. And those prices are pretty much still held. So I think that's great. That sounds like a deal to me. If I could get the same thing 12 years ago, for that price that I can get today, that sounds fantastic.
I can't disagree with you. You know, I think that obviously we could take a lesson, right? We're not handling this well, right? What we end up going on is stuff like there was a controversy recently because of Pantheacon, right? Pantheacon being the biggest pagan festival in North America, right? Now, there's an A list and there's a B list, right? The A-list presenters get paid for being there. The B-list
presenters, I didn't know anybody got paid. Oh, this is interesting. Okay.
Big names, right? You have to be like big names, but apparently they get speaking fees, right? The B-listers, we have to pay for the privilege of going there to present, right? Now, okay, I don't mind contributing like everybody else. I recognize the fact that, you know, we're a new religion. We don't have this ancient structure, you know, the you know, structure of the Afro-Caribbean traditions have existed, you know, a couple hundred years before modern pagan structures, right? You guys have a system. We haven't developed one yet. So I understand everybody's kind of got to throw in, but it kind of pisses me off to be, you know, throwing in and knowing that other people aren't. Right? And knowing that some of what I'm throwing in is going to pay other people to do exactly what I'm doing. Right? I don't, you know, I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair.
Well, so, I think that's really a different thing, and that really upsets me as well, because I think, especially within the last 10 years in the pagan community, because I really think it was better before that, where you could get people who were willing to honor their presenters because they were coming to give the community knowledge. I'm not saying we don't get anything out of going to an event as a presenter, but there was a clear demarcation of people would come as attendees, they would pay X amount of money, and then presenters would be given, you know, varying levels from, you know, you got your gas money, you got your room, or you got an honorarium, you know, and I think that's really important. And when I always was upset about Pantheacon, because it seemed to me that a lot of people were paying who really were really fantastic, amazing speakers. And I'm not saying they're not getting anything out of it, but I think a different structure where people who could come and were really just coming to attend, or I know other organizers who come just to sort of find talent, you know, those people were paying more of the bill and other people were paying less of it.
You know, I kind of agree, right? Like, I'm not, you know, if I go to an event and I present, right, I'm not expecting to get paid, right? But I would really appreciate, you know, having a place to sleep, you know, and maybe getting my gas covered, right? That would be cool. You know, and often, okay, I can't, this does happen, right? It does happen. More and more groups are moving this way. I've, you know, had lots of people who have hosted me for little or nothing, and, you know, I've had some great support, and it's been really cool. And I've attended some great events, you know, like the Canadian National Pagan Conference. We didn't have one this year, but last year I was one of the presenters there. They treated me like gold. It was great, right? They were wonderful, and I'm really grateful. So it's not that it doesn't happen, right? But the problem is, because there is no real standard of doing things, there's a lot of people do things in the way in which they feel best, and because there isn't a lot of standard, sometimes that gets abused. you know, it's sometimes maybe it is better to have a standard price, or to expect that people will, you know, throw in what they can, like, and that happens too, right? That there's one thing that a lot of events do is they have a sliding scale. You know, if you can afford to pay more, and if you can, you know, you can't afford to pay more, don't, right? And I love that. I think that's awesome. It runs into problems with really small groups, because then you end up with a lot of people in lower income brackets, right? And you know, like, I don't know, there's different solutions, right? There's an event that happens here in the Okanagan that is more like, it's sort of on the periphery between paganism and New Age. It's like a goddess spirituality with a lot of New Age influence, and it's called the Wise Woman Festival. It's been going on for 20-25 years, something like that. And when you present there, you're covered, right? You get dorm rooms, rich, you know, hey, cool, like, you know, I'll sleep in a tent, I don't care, right? But, you know, you get dorm rooms, and you get your meals covered, right? And you can go to other workshops and stuff, right? You know, nobody makes money at it, and that, but that's not the point, right? The point is needs covered, and that happens. So, but only after existing for like 25 years has this festival created enough of a situation. Yeah, and only, again, too, by moving into communities that pagan events often don't, right? Have we been able to, like, have they been able to do that? So I think that we may want to start looking more towards those solutions, and not immediately be assuming that just because somebody asks for a $5 donation to, you know, pay the door fee, that they're trying to bilk people. You know, and what's weird about it is that, on the other hand, pagans are happy to pay hundreds of dollars on bling, right? Like, they will buy the most amazing, like, you know, oh, I really want that Othame, so, you know, I'm going to ship it from across the border, and I'm going to pay $200 for it. And, you know, oh, look, isn't this spiffy? But, you know, I'm not going to pay a $10 suggested donation for the witch down the street who's been practicing for 30 years to teach me about, you know, cord magic. Like, why not? You know, why don't you do that? So
I think it's true. And I think, to me, it's, you hit on something, it's about respect, you know, and I find a lot of, you know, festivals and events at this point, like, they will turn down, well, okay, we don't want to get this presenter because that one's going to want their gas money, or that one's going to want that. We'll turn around and get, instead of the priestess who's got 30 years experience, we'll turn around and get somebody who's a self-proclaimed expert because they read a book, and put them, because, you know, that's just as good, fill up the slot. And that really makes me sad, you know, like, I think we need to respect people who've been in the tradition a long time and know what they're talking about.
I think it's, yeah, I think it's really sad. I think this is why people go, well, where are all the elders? They got burnt out, and they went broke, and they went home. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm. No, very true. Very, very true. I agree. I agree.
Okay, so then for a Wiccan, right, if you do believe, because, okay, it's a gray area, right? Because on the other hand, I do believe that, you know, I don't want religion to become commercial. I don't want our faith to be. I would like people to get involved and contribute on the level that they can contribute and turn no one away. I would really like to do that. So how do we do that in a way that, I guess, makes people appreciate the value of the service that is offered? And, you know, so what constitutes the craft that you're not charging for? And it's interesting that your traditions involve fees for initiation. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not. Right? It's a different way of doing things, and it's cool, right? Magical orders have been doing it for a very long time, and they do better financially than any pagan organization that I know of, so kudos to them. It must work great. But I myself would not charge money for initiations, because for me, that's part of the faith aspect, right? If you're coming for the faith aspect, I want you to be able to have that for free. I don't want you to feel obligated to pay. I want you to feel that you can contribute, right? But if you're coming to me for a tarot reading, you don't need that, right? You want that. And that's a service that I do. And it takes energy and it takes time and it takes skill. And I've been practicing a very long time. And I don't think it's unfair for me to ask you for some exchange for my service, right? You would pay a counselor, you would pay a lawyer, you would even pay the doctor here in Canada with your medical fees. Nobody ever complains when the doctors say they're not making enough money, you know? So, you know, why would that not be okay? Right? But we have that, you know, so for me, it's the faith part, right? You want to come to the Sabbat, you want to come to the Espit, come, right? And you know, we'll make it work. But if you want a tarot reading, if you want me to make you a wand, right? I feel it's okay to charge for my time, and I do.
Good.
I know some people are going to be throwing eggs at the screen by now, but you know what?
I know. Well, they can go wherever they want and receive their free services from people who are like-minded. You know, you get what you pay for. I'm sorry.
Yeah, or who can afford to do it. Some people can, you know, some people are fortunate enough that, you know, they come from more affluent backgrounds than I do, right? And they can do that, right? And, you know, but I can't, right? I can't do it, right? Because if I'm spending time making a wand, which I love doing, I love doing this, I love it. But if I'm doing that, then I'm not going to work, right? You know, I actually found a real, this past month or so, I took a temporary job, right, where I made my own hours. And I found that in a lot of cases, it was in direct conflict with the time that I normally spend doing craft-related work, which is, you know, writing. Like, if you follow my columns, you have seen that I have not written a lot over the past month. Because I've been out driving and earning money this way, right? So that's why, right? And so you got to find a way to balance that, right? And somehow I still have to put the roof over my head. What do you do, Lilith? Do you do other things in addition to, or are you fortunate enough to be a full-time priestess?
Oh, that would be lovely if I was fortunate enough to just make enough money from that. And really, honestly, in my 25 years of talking to other, you know, pagan practitioners and things like that, I've met, I think, 2 that managed to make, okay, and I'll say this realistically, because some people always say to me, oh, I'm going to become a famous pagan and make a lot of money. The best I've ever heard anyone honestly say they were doing was about $40,000, $50,000 a year. Which you'd make money more than that here managing a McDonald's. So just so people know.
Yep. Hey, I owned a metaphysical store because I wanted to be a full-time witch. And I tell you, right, I make better money on my husband's disability income before I had my part-time job at the bookstore that I work at. So there you go. That is what professional paganism looks like, folks.
No, I've done everything that I can possibly think of that involves the hustle. We should do a show about our Etsy stores and everything like that, because yeah, I have that. I have all these books and the blog and the ebooks and my own t-shirt line and everything. I've always done everything. You know, we both have our YouTube channels. I've always done everything that I can think of, and I still have to have regular, you know, other sources of income, or I wouldn't be able to make it here in New York City, you know, and I wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff I need to do, spiritual or otherwise. So money needs to come from somewhere else, you know. Luckily, I can find work that I love a lot of the time, so that's nice, but it's hard. It's always really hard, really, really hard. And like you were talking about, you know, okay, if you're going to go to university, well, some of us did go to university, you know, for better or worse. I went to the most expensive university in the world. Thanks, NYU. Not, but, you know, again, I value education, and I went where I needed to go to do what I wanted to do. And, you know, but it took a lot of time and energy and effort went into it. And it makes me sad, again, that some people don't value that, you know. I mean, you brought up readings. I remember I was sitting with Isaac when we were at his, he had a fundraiser because he was sick towards the end, and a lot of people were donating readings, and they're, you know, okay, you know, Judica donated a reading and it's this much, and this person donated a reading and it's this much. And Isaac and I look at each other and we're like, we need to charge more for our readings.
I remember that. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Yes. Finish. I'm sorry.
You know, and I'm not saying that I thought they were wrong for charging more, but, you know, I mean, it takes a lot. It takes, you know, and when you've been doing it for 30, you know, or 20, 30 years, you know, and you're an accomplished person, you're getting what you pay for, you know, so people need to realize that they really are getting somebody who's an accomplished person if they're going to somebody who's been established for a long time and studying for a long time. And again, if I went and got my appendix taken out for $5, I would really think somebody did a bad job, you know?
I totally hear you, right? I remember when Isaac Bonowitz was ill, you know, and towards the end, and, you know, like, and he was struggling, like, you know, he wrote, or his wife wrote, some very impassioned stuff on their website, and people got mad. And I was like, oh, yeah. But dude, you know, this guy wrote like one of the foundational texts on magic. He founded no less than what, 3 or 4 of the major pagan organizations that we still do for today. You know, he wrote original music, right? He gave his whole life, right? His whole life to paganism. Yeah. And so what happens to him in his old age? Oh, stop whining. You don't have any money to pay for your cancer treatment. Like, you know, well, I don't have a nice thing to say in response to that. I don't.
No, it was so sad.
Because I did not put an 18-year limit on this. And but what I really want to say starts with an F and it ends with a U. And yeah.
Like, no, really. I mean, and he had given so much, I mean, not just his work, he'd given so much actual money to the community. You know, he had gotten some money, and there was a time there before he started the publishing house, which again was a pagan publishing company, and he gave a lot of his money to that to see, you know, he started with my title and a lot of his titles and a lot of other people's titles that he helped to develop.
A lot of other people weren't doing it either, you know? Yeah,
you know,
and it was a risk.
I mean, my daughter was killed. He gave me money for the funeral. That was the largest donation I got from anybody, pagan, Christian, or otherwise, you know, and it was really beautiful. So, and even again, when we were at that fundraiser, it made me so sad because there were so few people there. It was just, I remember my friend Valerie, she's like, I just bought 5 signed copies of his books. I feel bad. But, you know, there was nobody there to really buy it because we didn't have the outpouring from the community to come and support him at that time, you know. I mean, I thank the goddess for the women and the men who did come out to support him, and that was lovely, but it wasn't, you know, anywhere near what I thought it should have been for somebody who started a religion, you know. And so I just think it is sad, and it makes me angry too. And I don't, you know, he was always going on about a pagan nursing home, and as people get older, people, you know, make jokes about it, but I think eventually we're all going to wish there was such a thing, and very few of us are going to be fortunate enough to take care of ourselves. And even in the humble way we've been accustomed to so far, you know, as we get older.
You have a good point there. You know, there's one thing where the lauded Canadian healthcare system really doesn't do the job that I think it could be doing, right? If you have the audacity to get old, right? There's not much for you, right? And it's, I mean, like there will be, right? There's things, and you can live in the hospital if you have to, but I'm telling you, that is not a quality of care you want to keep going for any length of time, because the nurses are overworked and they don't have time to do anything more than fix emergencies, you know? So, you know, we need to start thinking towards these kind of things. How are we going to care for our old? You know, how are we going to provide support for our disabled? You know, there's nothing right now. We have nothing, right? We need to make these things, right? Individual groups have done it, right? And individual groups have, you know, made a big difference. And if you can access those groups, that's great. And I won't say that pagans don't come together, right? Same accident when it happened to my husband. I had to like leave my job and everything, and I was, trying to live in Vancouver because he was at Vancouver General Hospital because it's a better hospital, right? And the whole community really came together. Like I do not have the words to describe just, somebody provided me with a place to live because they didn't have a renter in their basement suite, and other people, like I'd left with like a backpack, right? So people brought me clothes, and they brought me books, and they brought me a little television set, and, there's, and money, was not coming in because I was waiting for my EI. And just when I thought I was going to starve to death, people were like, oh, we got this climate rebate thing, and I wasn't planning on doing anything with it, so here you go, and so people can be really awesome. So I was very fortunate, right? And I'm really grateful, and we can be really good people, but that's what I mean, right? This shows me that we can do this stuff, right? That there are resources there, that there are people who are willing to do these kind of things. We just have to, stop trying to be the big fish in the little pond, and get over our egos and try to get along long enough to organize stuff like this. I think I'm starting to think what we should have is, sort of organizations which aren't to any particular branch of paganism, just kind of, pan-pagan organizations that are charities that we contribute to for these things. And when people need them, they apply for them. And there's a board that says, okay, yes or no, like any other insurance group, right? Only it's specifically for us. Like, this would be a place to start, right? If we could ever get a pagan nursing home going, I will so be there with my 70 cats. No, I don't have 70 cats, but I'm exactly the kind of person to be the crazy cat lady when she got older. That
Right.
Yeah, we need to create these things. But the only way to do that is to have somebody contribute cash. That's it. That there's we can do a lot of personal exchange and labor, and that's all good too. And I'm not like, I like barter, right? I'll do barter for things that I do in the community, because all I'm looking for is meet a need, exchange energy in the service, right? But it won't, it's not going to pay the rent on buildings. It's not going to pay for fees to license places. It's not going to, it's not going to pay for candles, Yeah. Like.
No, it's very true. I mean, I would like that. I don't know if we could all agree. I mean, it seems very difficult, and it seems like, I don't know what it is about. I don't know. Maybe it's just the nature of money or the nature of humanity, but it seems like a lot of times, you get an organization going and it gets to a certain size, and stuff starts to go wacky about the money. I mean, I'm sure we all have stories. I'm not going to go into them because this is not a gossip fest, but about, oh, okay, we all put our money into this land, and then this person turned into a crackpot, and then this person was a pederast, and this person was a lunatic, and this is a toxic waste dump, so
Yeah.
It seems like we could do that, but and it would be a lovely idea, but I can already think of a lot of people that would, probably try and take advantage of the situation.
Okay, I got some theories on that.
Okay.
I'm not gonna get into like the big details about them, probably, because it really would make for another show. But right. Okay, so one problem is that okay, nobody likes to hear this, but it's true. Paganism attracts more than its fair share of crackpots.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I'm not talking people with mental illness, right? I have chronic depression and seasonal affective disorder, right? I'm not anti mental illness, and it's not, I'm not about that. But people who, like I don't know, right? Like I don't want to, it's hard to point out, but we attract weird people, right? We do.
Sure. And I mean, I think you have to have a willing suspension of disbelief in order to say, oh, there's a fairy. Oh, yes, there it is. And that also means you're susceptible to other things that can be not so happy as a fairy in the corner.
Exactly, right? okay, so being totally weird myself and absolutely including myself in the group of weirdos, right? Okay, a lot of us come to this because we didn't fit in other places. If we did, we would be Christians or Buddhists or whatever else, because we would have found a sense of belonging there, right? But we didn't. For whatever reason, we didn't. So we came here. And because most of us have been rejected a lot, we're not quick to reject anybody else, to the point that we pathologically overlook things which should be warning signs in any other group. Right? Any other group would not tolerate some of the stuff that goes on. Sure. Because we're afraid to use our discernment, because we don't want to exclude anybody.
Right.
Now that's good in one hand, right? I love the inclusiveness of our community. But on the other hand, we are not good at creating boundaries either. So it gives people a free license to run rampant over the goodwill of everyone else around them. Right? So we need to do something about that. And there are people out there who are working towards creating safer spaces in which stuff like that is happening. Sean Knight in particular has done some really great work on that in recent years and written a lot about it. And, you know, I'm sure if I thought about it, I would think of a lot of others too. Right? I know Yvonne Abro has been contributing to that. You know, there's a lot of people, right? So we're starting to get there, but yeah. Right. And the other thing about it is that I guess a lot of us have had negative experiences with money in other contexts. So we just don't like the thought of money. We feel like it's tainted somehow. Yeah. And now, see, money, I struggle with it too. Right. Because I don't want it ever to be about money. But money is a magical concept, right? It's magic on its face. Our economic system is totally mojo. It doesn't really exist. It's entirely based on the perception of value. That is all. So why can we as magical people not seem to wrap our heads around it enough to have influence? And we don't. You know, we tend to be very highly educated and live in a lower income bracket than other people of our commensurate education levels, right? So, and now part of that is because we attract outsiders. We are a countercultural movement, but part of it is because we just have this aversion to money. I'm not sure what the solution is. I'm citing a problem. And I don't know. If I had the answer, I would be telling everybody to do it, but I don't. And I'm hoping other people will, if we can talk about it.
I mean, I think as we become stronger in our own individual groups and communities, then we can strengthen more of a, you know, intergroup thing, obviously, you know. I mean, that's enough of a struggle that I can see, you know.
You're probably right. I think that grassroots organizing probably is the best way to go. I don't think that trying to create some big overarching organization is going to work unless we have a stable foundation, and that is, you know, definitely going to be in local communities. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably, but that tends to be the place too where we fight the most, right? Because
yeah. I mean, and it's difficult, you know, it's difficult. We were talking about Isaac, you know, like there were definitely times where it was, you know, hard for him with ADF. I'm just going to leave it at that. You know, I can mention similar issues where people had, you know, Oberon and Caw. So I just think that there's been times, we were somewhere where they were trying to protest and keep him out of the pool. It was, anyway, but, you know, I think that it's, you know, we all need to be strong. But again, I'm mentioning those two because I'm mentioning people who've been in the community for decades and decades and were pioneers of their movement. And even there have been times where they struggled for support in the way that they needed at the time, you know. So I think that you know, we can all look to people who were here before us. I mean, none of us is running around, I'm the oldest, crotchetiest pagan. Although I might feel like it some days. I know it's not really true.
Oh no, I know you and I are like juveniles compared to some of these people who've been around here, you know. It's interesting too, right? Like, because from an outsider's perspective, right, Ka seems like one of the most got their shit together organizations that we have, you know, and I know they've had problems. I know that they've gone through periods where, you know, the newsletter didn't get published because they couldn't afford to do Green Egg anymore, you know, right? Like, I know they've struggled with, you know, power struggles and, you know, all this stuff, right?
It happens.
Yeah, it does. You know, so, yeah, it's not easy, right? Again, I don't know what the solution is. I just think that perhaps if people are willing to keep trying, maybe that's the best way, right?
Yeah, and like I said, I think respect and compassion go a long way, you know, because it's not, you know, like you mentioned those things about people who were attacking Phaedra and stuff like that when Isaac was sick, you know, like that could just as easily be you, you know, it could just as easily be you. So think about that before you attack, you know, someone's wife who's just trying to help them, you know, get what they need in order to have the proper treatment as they're, you know, trying to die gracefully. You know, that's not an easy thing. So I think if someone could see themselves in that situation, they'd be a little less likely to attack.
It's part of, it's a weird thing, right? There's another issue, right? Paganism, we have these ideas, people get involved in it, right? And when they're just starting, they're like, oh, I've discovered the mysteries of the universe. And yeah, you have, but the thing about discovering the mysteries of the universe, right, as they used to say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, right? You don't, you know, this is not Harry Potter, and even Harry Potter had his issues, you know? So, yeah, right. We develop these ideas that our leaders are these perfect people, right? And of course they're not. They're just people, right? And, you know, let's face it, they're probably weirder than most people because they're pagans and they've been pagans for years, and that takes a particular brand of weird, right? We kind of have to be a particular brand of stubborn, you know? So we're not, you know, like... I'm sure Oberon Zell puts on his underwear the same as everybody else, you know, right? And, you know, he has, like, okay, I like him a lot. I'm going to say that right now. I like him. I probably don't know him as well as you do. It sounds like you know him pretty well. I have only had the opportunity to interview him on a podcast once or twice, but I think he's awesome, right? So, you know, but he's just a guy, right? He says stupid shit. He screws it up. And then people who are new to this are all like, oh, well, you know, clearly he's not a real pagan because he, you know, opened his mouth and he made this mistake. And I'm, you know, well, what do you mean real pagan? You know, what, you know, can't people just be people?
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a thing too, right? And yeah, I don't know. That's probably another subject. I should probably shut up.
No, but I think you made a lot of really good points, and I think it does really revolve around money because it revolves around people who've been in the community, and as you mentioned, haven't necessarily been, you know, I don't know any pagan, you know, leader, even the ones that have been around for decades and decades, and are some of the most famous. I don't know any of them that are driving around in a limousine. I don't know any of them. Again, the best anybody ever said they did to me was honestly $50,000 a year, which is not that much money. It's really not. I'm not a greedy person, but that's really not that much money. Like,
see, and even the people who are managing to do, like, you know, they're probably actually making a living on it. People like Starhawk, right? They get a lot of flack for being expensive, you know?
Oh, sure.
So, like, oh, you know, she's so full of herself. No, she's just trying to pay her rent, for Christ's sake. Come on.
Yeah.
Give her a break.
Well, I've had nice dealings with her. She came to a few of my rituals. You know, I don't have a problem with her. And again, to me, like that's the joy and the beauty and the humility. That's somebody who could be, you know, I've had Starhawk at my rituals, and Margot, you came out a couple of times. You know, I mean, somebody like that could, I just want to make this point since we're talking about money, and I heard Elijah Wood say this today too, which I'm thinking, oh, look, Frodo feels this way too. It doesn't matter if somebody is accomplished and they've been there a long time. They still need to have humility in themselves. And these people that we're talking about do. You know, Elijah Wood was saying, you know, if somebody tries to tell him he doesn't have to wait online for a restaurant, he says that's wrong. I've seen my priestess do that. Like someone will try and give her food when we're online at an event or something. And she's like, if people need to stand here and wait, then I need to stand here and wait. There's nothing wrong with my legs. I'm not going to pass out if I wait an extra 10 minutes for dinner. And that's what I think being a person is, you know, and being part of the community is, no matter how, you know, big muckety muck pagan you might be, you know, that's part of the deal.
I think that most people who are big muckety muck pagans, as it were, like actual big muckety muck pagans, I think most of them that survive in the community, I think they're like that, you know? Yeah. I don't think they're looking for, you know, the people who do tend, like, okay, we do occasionally run into people who go off on their own self-importance. I'm not mentioning any names, but we've heard about some of them, right? I think that they tend to be people who are just becoming big muckety muck pagans, right? And, you know, they don't really know what to do with it. And
no, I know some that have been around a long time, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I suppose, eh? Yeah, well, you know, it happens, right? Okay, yeah. Right? But most people aren't like that, right? Most people, I think, if they're trying to do this, really believe in it and are just trying to, you know, continue doing it. So, you know, we can't be so quick to go, oh, well, you know, aren't your tarot readings a little expensive? You know? No, really, actually, they're not, you know? Right? It's, yeah, you know, and a lot of people.
It's crazy. I had, you know, and what are they spending the money on? You know what I mean? One of my favorite stories was I was doing readings for donation because in New Orleans, you can't have a set price really because it's against the law. So people say for donation, you know, and I would explain to them that my normal price was $55, but this was for donation. This girl sits down, she goes, well, I have $5, but I need 3 back. And then she proceeds to, you know, to continue drinking and cash out her bar bill and pull a bag of drugs out of her pocketbook. So I'm like, so, but where did your money go? You just spent all this money on festivities, but you're telling me you only want to give me $2 for a reading? I told her she wasn't going to get a reading. Like, I that was your reading.
Yeah, your reading is you need to, like, get your life together and reorganize your priorities. Here's your $3 back. Go away. Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly, right? It's like you were saying earlier, Lilith, it comes back to respect, right? It comes back to, yeah, you know, it comes back to respect. It comes back to how you value the skills, right?
Yeah, well, and how you really value what's happening and the craft itself, you know? I mean, the same night I had a professor sit down and she's like, oh, I'm a women's studies professor and, you know, I don't have this much money. I hope it doesn't insult you. And I looked at her and I was like, well, I've been insulted more this evening, you know, because she knew she was insulting me. She knew she'd spent all her money partying or drinking or whatever, you know, but she still wanted a reading. But again, like, what are we doing to ourselves, you know?
I had that happen. A lot of people would come into my shop, right? And what they really wanted was free counseling, except that they never took the advice they were given. You know what I mean?
Yes.
What they wanted is to be told, oh, you're wonderful and you're perfect and this guy's a real jerk or whatever, and, you know, go back to your life. And I'm trying to pay the rent, you know, and you're buying, like, you know, a handful of rocks, like, once a month, you know, like, you know, I have better things to do with my time. You know, I'm sorry that your life sucks, and I actually do have a lot of sympathy. And that's, you know, that's the thing too, because you know, I used to really get taken for a ride a lot because I genuinely want to help, you know, and I feel badly leaving people in the lurch if I know that, you know, I a lot of people don't have a lot of money, you know, I know that, right? But I still want to help. But then there's, you know, some people will just keep coming back and getting whatever, getting whatever they can, right, without ever giving back, and that's not fair.
No, it's not fair. And you know, my priestess likes to say, whose cup is it going to come out of? You know, if I give you something out of my cup and I share with you, well, how am I going to fill my own cup back up in order to have what I need for my life? You know, and yeah, that could be a money exchange, or I love bartering too. And with my own god kids, I'll barter time. I'll have them do work for me online or something else. I don't make them clean toilets, but maybe I will. But no, now, you know, they work for me online or do some writing work or something like that. And you know, it goes really well. And most of the time, no, I'm compassionate too. I don't have any money. You know, I've gotten food stamps and all the rest of that. You know, I know how it is not to be able to afford things. But most of the time, if I have somebody tell me they can't afford it, turns out, well, they can't afford it because they've already been to 4 other people that charged them X amount of money. And, you know, they spent their money on this stupid thing or this stupid thing or this stupid thing. And again, it's like, well, where are your priorities? If this was really important to you, you know, I had somebody, it was funny, I had somebody recommend a reader to me, and, you know, it was a very expensive reading and I couldn't afford it at the time, and I'd never been there. And I was sort of upset that he didn't have a sliding scale or something because it was more than I could afford at the time. It was several $100s for anybody who's asking, but I really wanted the reading. And I just, you know, and I waited and I waited, and it ended up that he was having a time where he decided he needed to change his policies to, you know, pay what you can. And then I got a reading, and it was one of the most beautiful readings I'd ever had, you know, and we were hugging each other and it was great. It all worked out.
I totally hear you there. I do, right? If it really is something that, you know, you really need, you know, the gods will put it in front of you, right? If you genuinely can't, you know, if you genuinely can't afford it, but you know that for whatever spiritual reason you do need it. And I've been in that situation myself. I have also been very, very poor in my life, right? At one time, we were literally surviving on what I could make busking. This, you know, and I went an entire winter with no heat, right?
Aww.
So I have been very poor in my life, and yeah, so but yeah, if you really do need it, and you put it out there that you really do need it, an opportunity will be provided. It will eventually happen. You might have to wait a while, right? It might require some patience. You might not be able to have it next week, right? But it'll happen, you know? Anyway, I think that I'm just going to get into, yeah, I mean, like, if I go on any further, I'm probably just going to start repeating myself, and that's unfortunate. I don't want to harangue the issue, certainly, right? In summation, I think that my position is that the craft is about the faith. For me, I will never charge for the faith aspects, right? And certainly, if you want to come, I will find a way to make it work. If you cannot contribute money to the Sabbath Fund, you could help me clean up the dishes. That would save me a great deal of time, and I would be very appreciative of that, right? But if other things that require my time and my energy are a service, right? Oh, and that's another thing, right? Sometimes people would come into my shop, and sometimes people come to me, and they need something, right? And if they need a spell, they need something, right? If I'm guided that you need it, I'll just give it to you, right? Because I'm never going to tell you you need something and then it's going to cost you this much. No, so you're never going to get that on me. If you need it and the gods are telling me you need it, I'll just do it, right? But if you ask, right, now it's a service, then there will be an exchange, right? That's my position on it, and how I choose to handle it in this, awkward situation. My other position is that I think that, okay, that's my personal position. Now my greater position of the issue is that I think that we are far too quick to condemn money in a world in which money is required. I think that we are not realistic about our expectations. And I think that if we want to have the things that other faiths have, we need to accept that, like other faiths, we need to pay for them somehow.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Do I have a summation? Okay. I mean, I think there's a couple of things I missed. Just quickly. I mean, I used to have, when people would come to me and they wanted to start studying, one of the things I would say is, well, go find a dollar bill. And they would be like, what? And I'm like, well, manifest a dollar bill somewhere in your travels. Like, oh, you found one on the bottom of your closet, or when you walked out the door on your way to work, or something like that, and I had one person come back to me, well, that's not voodoo, I'm leaving, but for me, it was a perfect test to see, well, first of all, was the person strong enough to be able to manifest money even in the smallest form somewhere throughout their day? And it was also a commitment to trying to, like, okay, I'm going to make this magical task something I need to move forward. And it was great to filter people out, because people would just be like, oh, I don't want to bother with that. And a lot of traditions, especially in Lukumi and things like that, you're supposed to beg for your money for initiation. It's easier now because someone can have a GoFundMe, like my godson, in order to get, his money for initiation. But what people used to do is just go out in the street and ask everybody for money for their initiation. And that was part of the process, the humility of trying to get this money together. No, maybe you don't have it, but if you ask the next 1,000 have these things happen and to manifest for you, and pay attention to where you're focusing your energy and where you really are spending your money. So that's my point about that, I think.
That's cool. Actually, I kind of like that as an exercise. You'll end up. I've learned to kind of make myself a pain in the ass, right? If somebody wants teaching, right? Because I've had a lot of people come to me and they've been very reluctant to actually do even the most basic of things to learn, right? I don't really know what they're expecting when they come. I think they want Harry Potter. But I'm not just going to tell you that you're all of a sudden the magical chosen one and you're the greatest witch that ever lived. You're not going to get that out of me. It takes work. So if you're not willing to do the work, I don't have time to teach you because I have better things to do with my time, right? So I make myself difficult to reach. You kind of have to hound me, right? And you have to be delicate about it too, right? Because if you're too much of a pain in my ass and demanding, I'll probably tell you to go away. But if if you're like, and I suppose to someone who doesn't know me or doesn't know the situation, I probably seem like a real jerk. And that's fair. And I can understand that. And maybe I am sort of a bit of a jerk because I'm kind of cynical. I used to say I refuse to pay anyone for the privilege of teaching them, right? I have been left holding the bag in so many different situations, right? So now, or people have just not wanted to put in the effort. So now I test your commitment, right? So that's a good exercise for that. I may take up something similar. I kind of like that. Yeah. Okay, but speaking of money and skills and whatnot, I understand that you have a new book coming out and you're actually getting published with my publisher, which is Wiser Red Wheel. So tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me about it. Yeah, you can finally pre-order it now on Amazon. It's going to actually be a physical in-hand book. They're telling me around Christmas. I got a cover here. If anybody can see that, it's going to be, oh,
Oh,
yeah.
pretty.
Yay. It's about love magic, and it's really I mean, it's a spell book, but it's a cross-cultural look at all different types of spells for love, everything from romantic love or, self-love, children, animals, everything is in there, getting rid of bad people, bringing in good people, everything you can think of. So, and it was a lot of fun to write. I mean, it's got everything in there, really. They were going to call it the big
I lost you there for a minute. They were going to call it what?
the biggest little book of love spells. So, I know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. Sometimes their ideas. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad they settled on something a little more simple. That's great.
Well, it's a small book. You're not going to be carrying around a gigantic, huge book, but there are spells for everything you would ever possibly need in there. So I think that's what they were going for with that. So, and like I said, it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how people receive it and things like that. And you can pre-order it now. So this is great.
Well, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. Awesome. And yeah, so that's Lilith Dorsey and Love Magic, it looked like the title was. Am I right?
Yes, yes. Yes. I didn't know until we started doing this that you were on the same publisher. So that's great. Everybody should check out your books as well.
My book and the 2 anthologies that I've contributed to. You're a much more prolific author than me, and that's really cool. I'm still working on it. I do too many things at once, and so I'm slow. But yeah, but thank you. That's cool. Okay, so we're going to meet again in another 2 weeks, and I'm not sure what to talk about. We were discussing, you mentioned that maybe we should do a show on like our Etsy stores or whatever. So how about a show on magical crafting? What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds fantastic. Magical crafting. Yay.
Awesome. All right, so that will be, let me look at my calendar here, the 18th of July.
And that'll be on my YouTube channel. Yes.
That's right. Yes, because this one will be online. So, yes. Well, happy 4th of July to all my American friends and our American viewers. And, that's really cool. And thank you so much. And looking forward to talking to you again in 2 weeks.
Oh, thank you. This was great. And yeah, happy 4th, everybody. I didn't get blown up, so we're all good.
Sounded like it there for a minute.
I know.
Fireworks going on there. That's cool.
M80s. It's still going. Yeah.
Okay, well, good night, everybody.
Bye.